This is a second video that I will show you a little bit more of the syntax and where we last left off. Okay, so here's the thing on how we can run text, right? Shift enter, command enter for the Mac. But if we want to make it bold or italicize it, we can do like this. Okay. Maybe we want to put an image into the text block for whatever reason, and that allows us to do that. Or we can even make a link, right? So if we want to link to a website or a file, a PDF, we could do that. We could incorporate that into our text blocks, right? So it gives us some utility beyond code if you have a need for wanting to incorporate that into your Colab notebook. Which brings me to the question, what if are there capabilities with this IDE over Jupyter notebooks? Yeah. So the thing is you're not consuming the RAM, like I said earlier. So, but we use something called libraries. And so, how do libraries relate to RAM? A library is, think of a bundle of functions. So in like Excel, if we use the if statement to, or some product, right? RAM can consume a lot of our CPU. By default, we're using the CPU in Colab. And it's not just, but when we more advanced our calculations get, but we have the ability to turn on more advanced processing by using a cloud server. We can do a GPU, which is graphical processing unit, or a TPU, which is a Tensor processing unit. So TensorFlow is kind of big. We can turn on high RAM if we need to. We can run other languages. Okay, I run R, but I also use RStudio. So that's aside from this. But the thing is, understand by using and operating out of the Google servers, it gives us some benefits, whereas our local computer may be challenged on RAM for more advanced big data or artificial intelligence or machine learning. For most people, the CPU is quite fine, and so there's no it's not necessary to start activating the GPU or TPU. But know that you have that available if your computer is maybe lighter on the RAM. So I brought up libraries. And libraries play an important role in giving us more functionality beyond just doing these basic mathematical operations that I've showed you. A library can have anywhere from 5 to 100 different functions. So think again as a bundle of utility. Okay, so as I was talking about with using some product or an if, you fill in parameters, and within those parameters, you get to maximize and get some output or benefit from the function. Okay, that's the same type of thought process with Python, and when we use different libraries and associated functions. So what is a function? It's a statement with parameters. And in Excel, we set it off with parentheses. In Python, the way we typically do this is when we load a library, we activate it with the library, typically with a dot, which calls that particular function, and then within parentheses, we put in those parameters. Whereas in Excel, we do equal, if, parenthesis, and then we put in those values, and then we get some output, right? So it's very important that you understand, though, when we use parentheses, but for a different use in Python, to get libraries loaded, we we do an install. But as I mentioned a little bit earlier, make sure to always comment out, because I'm going to do this so that we can kind of follow how to install a library. And once you install the library, you don't need to reinstall it. You have to call it, though. When we call it, that tells it we want to use it, because it's not always active like in Excel where you have all features. Okay, so you install it once and it stays on your Google server. Right now I'm going to install the Pandas library. And Pandas is extremely useful for data manipulation, importing CSV files, Excel files, data frame setups. So it has a lot of value in it. Okay, you're noticing here it's already loaded for me. The one thing I would tell you that we can check the version control, which is really important in programming, and because we want to make sure we're using the most up-to-date. Since you're using Colab, it gives you the most up-to-date and keeps it so that if there's any issues with the prior version, it gets fixed. Okay, so remember, this is all open source. It's free, right? And when we import in, after we install it, we import it. So that's how we activate it. And you'll notice I shortened it. I call it PD. This is common nomenclature or usage of language. Otherwise, we got to type pandas every time. So by typing in it as import pandas as PD, that every time we call that function, right, we activate it with PD dot. I want to show you a few things here on how to get some help. This is extremely useful. So here's a version control, so PD, right? And so we're using 1.53, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, or it may come in more for a data scientist perspective, but at least that's how you can see what version control, and you can get citations like who the developer is, but it's more for informational purposes than anything. But you do know that it's very common, and then like NumPy would be import NumPy as MP, okay? And that's a different type of function. We won't get into it today, but at least you're familiar with it, and then I've covered it, okay? All right, so let's do this. Let's show you how to access the functions with this. You may question, well, what functions are within this particular library? By typing in dir parentheses PD, PD is pandas, right? So we've already shortened the name. Here's the many things that it can do for us. Okay. We can merge data. I brought up, we can do read in CSV files, Excel files, so for further processing, JSON files. JSON is typically what is used in social media. Okay, so like a Facebook or Twitter, the files extracted out of that would be a JSON. Okay, so there's multiple usages with pandas when we want to start looking at importing, exporting, data manipulation. Okay. Now, how about if you want to understand a little bit more about a particular function? So this shows you what our functions are within the library. Again, this is more Python and a splash of Colab, but it's important for you to understand in navigating when we're using different functions beyond the mathematical operations. Okay. So if we do pd.read underscore CSV, so we got the library and the function, and we do a question mark, this is going to put it on the right side. And I'm going to show you another way here in a little bit. We can use the help function, and it's going to put it below. So it's the exact same what it's going to tell us about the usage of this particular function. It just shows in a different way. And if you can see right here, these are the parameters. A lot of them are default, so you don't have to go adjust all these. And you can learn more about the details of this particular function right here. Okay. And here at the end, there's an example of what it may look like, right? So as you're putting in that syntax to import data right here, that right there would tell you this is how you type that in, right? So that data would be the object. That can be covered more at a later time, but at least you have a frame of reference, okay? And then also, I think it's very important that we understand this. We type in help, parentheses, PD read underscore CSV, right? And that's going to be the exact same like I just said, but it's going to be underneath, so it doesn't put it out to the side. The help, no, when you put the question mark, it puts another pane, I guess you could say, on the right side to read through. If you want to read it below, then you could use the help. Again, no difference. To close it out, click right here. We can clear out the output. All right. It's good for navigating and functionality. Okay. Another nice thing with Colab is with these blocks that we've been working within. Okay. You can see we can kind of scroll. Potentially we want to move a block, right? So maybe we want to move a block up or move a block down. We can use these arrow keys, which is really nice because we can't necessarily do that with Jupyter notebooks, but we can do it with Colab. Maybe we want to move one down, okay? We're going to put the headings down. What I will tell you though, if you move it out of order, and if you have an object that's assigned, and you've reset the runtime, it won't populate, right? So like, if we reset the runtime, and we reset the runtime if maybe the system gets hung up, and it doesn't delete your code per se, maybe you just need to reset the runtime and let your system run again, right? So if you find it's not using, but look here, if I push this, that A is not assigned yet. Even though we assigned it earlier, we're going to error message here. So it's not defined. If you look down below where we assign 5 plus 5, we would have to run that code first. And once we run that, then we could call that object and we would get the output. But know that it's kind of an order thing, right? So if you get it out of order and you try to run that code, it won't process correctly. So that's a really, really important thing to understand. All right. So we went through the basic math operations. I've showed you Colab and how it can be a little bit more efficient on the Google server in saving all the libraries, getting kind of relatively large, not too bad, but it really gets into the computing power. Okay. Now, can you open up a new notebook? Absolutely. We can have a new notebook and have it operating side by side. What's important for you to understand though is they're separate, and so what we've done in one notebook doesn't transfer into another, so they're recognized as independent. Okay, so if I go try to call A, we're going to get an undefined because it's not been assigned in this particular notebook. Okay, so know that you can have as many open as you want. I say that figuratively. Just don't get confused when you have multiple notebooks open. Okay. Just a few more things, and we'll take a little quick break on this video, and we'll talk about, kind of close out functionality with Colab with saving data and then importing it. Okay. All right.